All right, so in 1-3, we talked about midpoint and distance. Okay, we went over the midpoint formula and the distance formula. So number 1 says AB bisects CD at E. If CE is 2 1/4 inch, find CD. So what's the word bisects mean? Intersects it at the middle, right? At its center. So if you need a visual on this, if I had AB, okay, bisect CD at E. So if it bisects it, it cuts it into 2 congruent parts. So if CE is 2 1/4, how could I find CD? Just double it, right? Or add together. So what should you get? 4 1/2. Good. Number 2 says point M is the midpoint of XY. Find XM. So now we're talking midpoint. What's a midpoint? The middle, right? So these two are congruent, and if I wanted to solve for x, I would do what with them? Good. Set them equal to each other. Okay, subtract the 2x. Add the 23. I get 6x equals 30, and x equals 5. Is it asking for x? No, what's it asking for? Good. So I'm going to take this and then plug it back in. And it doesn't matter because these are both the same, right? If it was this is x and this is y, this is m, I can plug it back in here. Or I can plug it back into the other one, and I should actually, if I have extra time on the quiz and this is a question, I would take the time to plug it back into both to check. Okay, number 3 says point M is the midpoint of QP, or PQ, sorry, with endpoints P of 2, -6 and Q with -8, 0. Find the coordinates of M. How do I find the midpoint? Add them and divide by 2. Good. Okay, so I'd get 2 plus a -8 divided by 2, -6 plus 0 divided by 2. So -6 over 2, which is -3, and -6 over 2, which is -3. If you need a visual or you want visual confirmation, you can plot those points, and you should see that 3, -3 would look like it's halfway between them. Questions on 1, 2, or 3? Laura. Oh, yeah, sorry, I just didn't even carry that negative over. Thank you. -3, -3. Which, if I had graphed, I should have been able to catch that, right? Because it wouldn't have been on that segment. Okay, number 4 says the midpoint of GH is M, 4, -2. One endpoint is G, 5, 3. Find the coordinates of H. This is the one we struggled with a bit on Friday. Let's make sure we get this right, okay? So if I wanted a visual again, let's say I've got M is 4, -1. That's my midpoint, and G is 5, 3. 5, 1, 2, 3. What I want to do is find this other point here, which is H, okay? So this is my XM for midpoint. This is my YM for midpoint. This would be my X1, and this would be my Y1. So X1 plus X2 over 2 is going to equal the X coordinate of my midpoint. And Y1 plus Y2 over 2 is going to equal the Y coordinate of my midpoint. So the X coordinate of my midpoint, which is 4, equals 5 plus X2 over 2. Multiply 2 on both sides. I get 8 equals 5 plus X2. And X2 is 3. With me so far? Yeah? And then come on the... Okay, let's try that again. So Y1 is 3 plus Y2 is what I don't know, over 2 equals the Y coordinate of the midpoint, which is -1. Now I'm going to multiply by 2. And then subtract the 3, and I get Y equals -5. So 3, -5. Questions? Still with me? Still good? Feel a little bit more comfortable with that now than you did Friday when you were in here? Yeah, good. Because obviously there's going to be something like that on your quiz. Alexis?
The X and the Y, those are the midpoints that we had.
Correct. Those are the X and Y coordinates of the midpoint. Okay, here's the solutions to the review practice worksheets that were assigned for the quiz. Number 1 says the directions say use the diagram to decide whether the given statement is true or false. So H, I, and G are collinear. Here's H, here's I, here's G. They all lie on the same line, so that is true. Number 2 says points H, I, and J are coplanar. So H is here, I is here, and J is here. Those would all lie on that vertical plane, so that's also true. Number 3 says E, G, and F, G are opposite rays. So E, G, with the endpoint being here, would point here and over. And then F, G would be with the endpoint on F pointing this way. So they're not pointing in opposite directions. This would be false. If the arrows were going the other way, if it was G, F, and G, E, then they would be opposite rays. Okay, clean this up. Number 4 says all points on GI, ray GI, and ray GF are coplanar, and that's true. They would all be on that plane that extends. Okay, number 5 says the intersection of EF, which is line EF, and plane JK8, which is this vertical plane, is line HI. And this line meets this top plane at a single point, so that's false. Number 6 says the intersection of EF, so let me clean this up again. The intersection of EF, line HI, and line JG is a point G, and that is true. Number 7, the intersection of plane EGH. So EGH is your horizontal plane, and plane JGI, which is the vertical plane, is point G, and this is false because those two meet at a line. And the last true or false, and the intersection of plane EFI. So EFI, again, is that horizontal plane, and plane JKG, which is this vertical plane, is line HG, and that is true. Okay. The next section says to sketch the figure described. So this is, it doesn't have to be exactly like the way I'm going to draw it, but within the guidelines. So 2 rays that don't intersect. You can have an endpoint pointing this way and an endpoint pointing this way. As long as they're not pointing in the same direction, they're not going to intersect. 3 planes that intersect in one line. So if I drew a vertical plane, something like that, and then a horizontal plane, something like that, and then maybe like a catty corner plane running that way. These would all meet at one line. Number 11, 3 lines that intersect in 3 points. So let's say I have a line going here, and a line here, and a line here. These would be 3 lines that intersect 3 points. 12, a ray that intersects a plane at 1 point. So I've got my plane. Let's shade it in a little bit. And then I've got a ray, that intersects at 1 point. So if I've got a ray, single endpoint, it's going to hit this plane and then come out on the other side. And that would be intersecting at 1 point. 13 through 15 says to use the diagram to name 12 different rays. So there's a lot of options here, but let's say, we'll go through some of them. Let's say ED is 1, and then back the other way would be DE. You've got ray DC, and the other way, ray CD. you've got ray EC and ray CE. And then I can work with AB, BA, and then you can do AC, you can do CA, you can do CB, you can do BC. Okay, number 14, name a pair of opposite rays. So we need two rays that have the same endpoint. So an example could be CA and CB. Number 15 says name three lines that intersect at point C. So I've got point C here. I've got this line here, which would be line CD. I've got this line here, which would be line CE, and the order of those letters doesn't matter. And then this one here, which is AB. Okay, so for this one, it says you're given the equation of a line with a point. Use substitution to determine whether the point's on the line. So I'm just going to take this and substitute it in for the x and the y. So the y is 3, negative 6 plus 3, and then I get 3 equals negative 6. Because that does not work, this is a no. I'm going to do the same thing here. This is my x and this is my y. So 2 times 3 minus a negative 1 equals 7. 6 minus negative 1 becomes plus 1. And then 7 equals 7. This one does work, so this is a yes. And the last one over here, 23. This is my x and this is my y. So negative negative 6 minus 4 times 2 equals negative 14. 6 minus 8 equals negative 14. And negative 2 does not equal negative 14. So this one's a no. Number 25, or the directions for this section, says graph the inequality on a number line and tell whether the graph is a segment, ray, or rays, a point, or a line. So if you remember from from algebra, if I put this on a number line, so let's say that this is 2, this is 3, this is 4, this is 5. If I want to say less than or equal to, or greater than or equal to, I put a solid dot. So these two would get dots, and this is x has to be greater than 2, but less than 5, so it would look like this. And this would be a segment. Okay, so now let's look at 1, 2. 1, 2 said, and the first one you're just measuring, so I had to skip it. The second one is use the segment addition postulate to find the indicated length. So if this whole thing is 54, and this part is 25, to find BC, I just have to do 54 minus 25. And I get 29. Okay, come down here to 7, plot the points in the coordinate point to determine whether the line segments are congruent. So I'll start with 2, 2, this is A, 4, 2, this is B, negative 1, this is C, negative 1, 1, this is D. And it wants you to compare A, B, and CD. Well, this one should be pretty easy because this is a horizontal line. 1, 2, and 1, 2 vertical line. These are congruent. So A, B is congruent to CD. Number 9, E is negative 3, 4. F is negative 1, 4. G is 2, 4. And H is negative 1, negative 1. And it wants you to compare, this is G and this is H, and it wants you to compare EG and FH. So EG goes from negative 3 to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 units. And FH goes 1, 2, 3 units. So these are not congruent. Okay, this section, use the number line to find the indicated measure. So A to B, 1, 2, 3. C to D, 1, 2, 3, 4. Remember, you can always take the bigger one and subtract the smaller, so that would have been 0 minus a negative 4. CE, C goes all the way to E, so this would be 2 minus a negative 4. 2 plus 4, which is 6. And BE, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, or 2 minus a negative 6, which becomes 8. Okay, so this is the back page of, or second page of 1.2. Number 25 says to find the indicated length, and this is using your segment addition postulate. So this plus this would equal the whole thing, which in this case is 32. So 4x plus 12x equals 32. 16x equals 32, and x would equal 2. And then it wanted you to find ST, so I'm going to plug it back into the 12. 12 times 2, which is 24. 27, this little segment is x minus 5, and then 3x plus 2, so x minus 5 plus 3x plus 2 equals 6x minus 23. Combine my like terms, 4x minus 3 equals 6x minus 23. Subtract the 4x and add the 23. X is 10, and then it says to find NP, so 3 times 10 plus 2, which is 32. The next set says J is between H and K on HK. Use the given information to write an equation in terms of X and then solve the equation and then find HJ and JK. So I've got H, K, and J is somewhere in between, not necessarily halfway between. So for 29, it gives you this is x over 4. This is 3x minus 4. And then the whole thing is 22. So x over 4 plus 3x minus 4 would equal 22. I can multiply everything by 4 to get rid of my fraction. I'd get x plus 12x minus 16 equals 88. 13x, add the 16, and divide by 13. I'm going to get x is 8, and then I want to find hj, so this would be 8 over 4, which is 2. jk, which would be the same thing, or it should be the same thing, 8 times 3, which is 24 minus 4. Oh, sorry. These are not necessarily the midpoint, so it shouldn't have to be the same thing. 3 times 8 minus 4, 24 minus 4, which is 20. What these two should do is add up to that 22, which they do. Okay, 31, hj is 5x minus 3, jk is x minus 9, and kh, the whole thing, is 5x. So 5x minus 3 plus x minus 9 equals 5x. 6x minus 12 equals 5x. Subtract that 6x. Negative x equals negative 12, and x equals 12. And then it says to find hj, so 5 times 12 minus 3, 60 minus 3 is 57. And then find jk, 12 minus 9, which is 3. Okay, the last one says, to find the distance between the swing and the sandbox in his backyard. Darren made a graph. Don't you guys all do this just for fun? In your free time, you go in your backyard and you're like, how can I figure out the distance between the sandbox and the swing? Don't lie, you do it. He made a graph and found the coordinates of the swing to be 7, 2, and the coordinates of the sandbox to be negative 3, 8. Find the distance between the swing and the sandbox to the nearest tenth of a unit. Okay, so this time, this would be our x1, this could be our y. And all we're doing is plugging into the distance formula. X x2 minus x1 squared plus y2 minus y1 squared. So x2 negative 3 minus 7 squared plus y2, which is 8 minus 2 squared. Negative 10 squared plus 6 squared, 100 plus 36, square root of 136. Okay, now we don't have a calculator and said to the nearest tenth of a unit. What could we do? You could do your factor tree. Eventually, I'm gonna get to a point that I've got a square root though, and it wants me to get to the nearest tenth. Can we estimate what it could be? Yeah. So what perfect squares come before and after 136? 121 and 144, right? Which would be 11 and 12. About midway between there, right? So if we could take a guesstimate, what would you say this was? It's going to be smaller than 12, right? It's got to be in between 11 and 12. 11.5, sure, okay. We're estimating, all right? But we're somewhere in between 11 and 12. Obviously, if you had a calculator, if this was a standardized test, then you would put that in the calculator and square root it. Nope. You won't have a calculator until we get to Treg, which is a far away place from here, okay? Okay, now we're on 1-3. So number 1 says RS bisects PQ at point R. So PQ, line RS, bisects, which means it cuts it into 2 equal parts. If PQ is 14 centimeters, find RQ. This would be half, so this would be 7. Number 3 says point T bisects UV. So I've got UV, point T would be your midpoint. And it says UT is 4 1/2 yards. Find UV, the whole thing, 4 1/2 times 2, which is 9. Numbers 5 and 7, the directions say in the diagram, M is the midpoint of the segment, find the indicated length. So if I've got these two being congruent segments, that means x plus 9 would equal 4x. Subtract the x, 9 equals 3x. Divide by 3, and x is 3. And then it says find the indicated length, so once the whole thing, 2 choices, plug it back in either spot, so I'd get 12 plus 12, or do one of it and double it, because it would be the midpoint. Again, M is the midpoint, so these two are congruent. 4x minus 12 equals negative 2x plus 21. Add the 2x, add the 12, and then divide by 6. I get 33 over 6, which they're both divisible by 3. Would be 11 over 2. And then it wants MR, so you want to take negative 2, multiply it by 11 over 2, and add it to 21. These twos cancel, and I get a negative 11 plus 21, which is 10, the length of MR. Okay, number 8, or sorry, for the group 8 through 11, it says find the coordinates of the midpoint of this segment. So remember the equation for midpoint is x1 plus x2 over 2, y1 plus y2 over 2. So I use that to get 9. So this is my x1, y1, x2, y2. 4 plus 0 over 2, 2 plus 2 over 2, 4 over 2, 4 over 2, 2, 2 is the midpoint for number 9. And then 11. Do over here. So negative 2 plus negative 3 over 2, negative 8 plus negative 12 over 2. get negative 5 over 2, and I get negative 20 over 2, which is negative 5 over 2 or negative 2.5. Either answer is okay. And negative 10. Okay, number 12 through 15 says use the given endpoint and the midpoint to find the coordinates of the other endpoint. So this is the one where we've got to split them. So I would say that xm is going to equal x1 plus x2 over 2. And then I'm going to say ym, which stands for the y coordinate of the midpoint, y1 plus y2 over 2. So take this as my x1, y1, and this is my xm, ym. So 3 equals 3 plus x2 over 2, solved by multiplying by 2. Subtract the 3, and x2 is 3. I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. The y coordinate of my midpoint is negative 2. y1 is 4. Multiply by 2. Negative 4 equals 4 plus y2. Subtract the 4, and I get negative 8. So the coordinates of my endpoint would be 3, negative 8. And then 15, let me bring it down here. So the same setup, xm, so this is my x1, y1, x2, y, or sorry, x1, xm, ym. So the xm would equal the x1 plus x2 over 2, and the ym equals y1 plus y2 over 2. Multiply by 2 on either side. Negative 8 equals 11 plus 8, x2, subtract the 11, and I get negative 19. Multiply by 2. Negative 8 equals negative 5 plus y2, add the 5, and y2 is negative 3. So I get negative 19 and negative 3. Okay, this last problem says find the length of the segment and round to the nearest tenth of a unit. So I'm actually going to keep it as a simplified square root instead of rounding. This is the distance formula. So this is x2 minus x1 squared plus y2 minus y1 squared. So if this is my x1, y1, and this is my x2, y2, and it doesn't matter which ones you pick as long as you're consistent, I would start by saying 2 minus 4 squared plus negative 1 minus 4 squared, negative 2 squared plus negative 5 squared, 4 plus 25, which is the square root of 29, which is prime. It doesn't break down at all, so it would stay that way. All right, good luck on your studying.